Recording this thing. Okay, welcome to another lecture for 315. Today we'll do chapter 7 and then I'll do a review of the exam that's going to be this weekend. So I will open the exam on Friday and then you can work it through the weekend. And it's the same thing, it's 25 multiple choice, same as the first exam. And you have 60 minutes to finish it. And it will cover chapters 3, 5, 6, and 7. So I'm going to share my screen with you and we'll go from there. Oh, let's see. Okay, so chapter 7. This chapter is, in fact, the beginning of what you will study again in your auditing course in 440. So this deals with what auditing and AIS and how it applies to accounting and financial statements. So basically, we have to understand what controls are. Every company is there to make money, and their profits are based on how well they operate and how well they control fraud and any loss within the company. So to minimize loss because of errors or frauds, you have to develop something called as controls that are internal to the company, called as internal controls. And these are basically things such as having a good AIS system, good computer system, good antivirus, good hardware, good employees, having cameras. So they're physical controls and some of them are logical controls. So basically what this slide is, and I would say this slide is important for your exam, is that controls are basically put in place by the management to safeguard your assets, physical assets, also your computer system. And the biggest thing it does is to provide accurate and reliable information. This is your financial information. This information is not only used by the company internally, but it's also used by all the investors and the shareholders, anybody that's investing in the company, such as banks, private investment firms. So they need to have good, reliable information. And the reliable information only comes when you have proper controls. That means nobody is making up numbers. It should be what it should be. So if you make journal entries, it should have some kind of a proof where the entries are coming from. And for that, you need to have a good, reliable system that will give you accurate information. And so again, there are laws and regulations that require that every company has some kind of a control within them. And we'll look at what that law is in the other slide. But these are basically the functions of internal controls. There are 3 functions, and there is a question based on this. There is preventive, corrective, and detective controls. The idea of a preventive control is to prevent any fraud or error from happening. And companies should place as much as money as possible on creating good preventive controls, such as firewalls or antivirus software are all preventive controls. Placing lock and key, cameras, hiring good people are all preventive controls. But no company, can have 100% good preventive controls. Even if you have a good company like GE, or if you say Microsoft, they still have some kind of problems. And so if you have some kind of problems, you need to have controls that can detect any error. And so you need to have good detective controls. You should be able to find out where the problem is, and you should be able to correct them. So you need to have good corrective controls. And so every company will have 3 layers of controls. One is the preventive controls, one is the detective controls, and one is the corrective controls. And again, you can apply these controls at the overall level, which is the general level, which is for all the aspects of the companies. And then you can also go more specific per application. For example, you can have a control for the entire IT system of the company, such as firewall and antivirus. But then also you can have good preventive controls per application, such as for Excel files, for Access files, for Microsoft Word files, for your Outlook. So you can go overall controls, and then you can have more specific controls for all your applications. So what we have to understand is why we are studying this, and why do we need to understand all this stuff. So in back in 2001, we had a company called as Enron, and there was another company called as WorldCom. These were the two biggest frauds that were discovered at the time, and these frauds were there because they did not have proper controls within the company. Basically, what happened was the CEO of the company and the CFO of the company were changing numbers. In fact, Enron had a loss of $10 million. They simply changed the number to $10 million profit instead of loss. And people were investing in the company. The company had no cash, and company went bankrupt. Everybody working within the company lost every investment they had with the company and also their jobs. Um, so there was a law needed, and that law is called as the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. These are two senators, Sarbanes and Oxley, that came together and gave us a new rule of a new way of doing auditing and developing your AIS system. And that's why what you're studying now is based on that rule. So Sarbanes-Oxley you'll study now, and then you'll study in more details when you go into auditing. And most of the CPA questions deal with what the changes were and what the requirements of SOX, which is Sarbanes-Oxley's is also called a SOX 2002. And what it was designed to do is to develop and help companies develop the controls within the company and help the auditors, which is the independent third party, to come and audit them to make sure that everything within the company is okay and the statements are okay and that the numbers that you see are good. There is no error or there is no fraud. The Securities and Exchange Commission, along with the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. So the SEC, every company that's public has to register with the SEC. And again, if you don't understand a lot of this right now, when you go into auditing, you will get more of this because we'll repeat everything that we study in this chapter, and we'll divide them into different chapters in auditing. And so we'll go into more details. For now, all you have to understand that there is a rule called as Sarbanes-Oxley, which was developed in 2002 by the United States Congress, the government, along with the help of the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, that regulates every company that is public, and they tell you how the stocks are bought and sold in the open market. And so they came up with a board that would help make sure that the auditors and the management is doing their job. It's called as PCAOB, a Public Company Accounting Oversight Board. And with that rule, with SOX that developed PCAOB, it makes sure that every person that is monitoring the financial statement knows how to do their job and reports them in the right way. Okay. Did SEC exist before? So the SEC was developed in 1820. So the SEC, as soon as the company started going public, there was a separate entity that the US Congress developed in the 1800s called the Securities and Exchange Commission. So this has existed for a very, very long time, almost 200 years. That's a good question. Okay, so the new auditing, welcome. So the new rules also require that the auditors, which is the independent monitoring committee, rotate their partners on regular basis. It's normally every 5 years. And that the auditors cannot do certain non-audit services. Again, this is more getting into auditing part of it. For now, only understand, for the exam purposes, know that you have a law called as SOX, you have a body called as PCAOB, and then they make sure that the auditors are in rotation every 5 years or every period. I'm not going to ask you questions about that. And then you cannot perform certain non-audit services. Again, I'm not going to ask you questions on that because you have an entire chapter for that in the auditing part in 440. Some new rules and some new roles for the audit committee. So how do we understand what an audit committee is? We need to understand what a company looks like. So a public company is owned by the shareholders. Anybody that owns shares of the companies are the owners of the company. They hired an independent body called as the board of directors. Since shareholders are anybody and everybody, they don't go to work every day. They have people working for them. Because if I own a stock of Microsoft, I'm not going to work there. I'm just a stock owner. So I'm the owner of the company for that portion that I bought. So I have people called the board of directors, and the board of directors will then hire the CEO, the CFO, and then every person that's at the top management. And then from down there, the CEOs will hire their own team and all that stuff. And that's how a public company is formed. And so the board of directors' job is to be a liaison between the auditors, I'm sorry, the stockholders, the owners of the company, and the management of the company. Out of which there is a committee from board of directors called as the audit committee. Yeah, it's a proxy. It's like a proxy. And their job entirely is to make sure that the management is doing their job. So out of that, there is something called as an audit committee, and the job of the audit committee is to make sure that that the management is doing their job in terms of reporting how the financial statements are reported, and how they communicate with the outside parties, and how to hire the external auditors and all that stuff. So the audit committee, all you have to remember for this course is the audit committee is made up of the board of directors. It could be all of the board of directors. For example, GE's board of directors are 12 members in a board of director, and all of them could be part of the audit committee, or 5 members of that entire board could be an audit committee. So it depends entirely on the company and the size and the money that the company has. New rules for the management is that every financial statement should have disclosures. So disclosures are footnotes for every financial statement. Remember, we have 4 statements: income statement, you have the balance sheet, you have statement of retained earnings, and then you have the and the cash flow statements. For all those 4 statements that you have, you need to have proper disclosures, footnotes. Where is this money coming from? Who is your biggest customer? How do you intend to expand your business? How do you deal with losses? And all that information should be given in the footnotes. And so they should be clear, they shouldn't be misleading, and that the auditors can come in and see if everything is okay or not. Okay. All right. Okay. Um, and again, so the management is also responsible for paying to create new controls. So when you had this new law that came in 2002, all the public companies had to change their software, they had to change their hardware, they had to change policies of how to hire people, how to do background checks of people, how to train people. And it was a lot of money, and you have to do it year after year. You have to write a report on that, and the report has to be fair and not misleading. So that's what this entire thing is talking about, that your policies have to be changed, you need to follow the rules given by SOX, and that you need to have an independent body, the board of directors, making sure that the management is doing their job. Okay. All right. So again, management rules. This is some more information to that. And everything is all about financial statements. So everything that you do ends up on the financial statements. If you don't have good people that you hired, they'll make a lot of errors, especially in the accounting department. That's why you have 5 or 6 different interviews you go to before they can hire you. Mainly, they're checking for 2 things. They're checking for, one, your personality, of course, and the other one they're checking for is your accounting knowledge. So every accounting job interview you go for, they will check your accounting knowledge. And if you go through a hiring agency, they'll give you a test of 100 questions, most of which are accounting related questions, financial accounting questions, because they want to hire accountants, and they want to reduce errors and any kind of weaknesses in their statements. So this is all new because SOX requires a new hiring policy. And since you are directly dealing with financial statements, there is a lot of requirements before you can get hired. Okay, so there is something called as a framework that is given. When SOX came in, when Sarbanes-Oxley was developed, nobody knew what it meant and how to utilize that. So the company said we will develop a different policy, and we'll write a policies that makes it clear for you how to develop those controls within the company. And they name these controls or these policies as COSO, Committee of Sponsoring Organizations. It's made up of 5 people that sit there and tell you how to develop those controls within the company. Because if you make an error, you get fined by the SEC and the US Congress. And these fines are significant. They are in millions of dollars. So you need to know how to develop that. So to educate the management, this framework was developed. There are mainly five things or 5 criterias that you need to have. Uh, and all of them are important. I'm going to ask you, there's a question based on this slide. So there's something called control environment, control activities, risk assessment, information and communication, and monitoring. So your control environment. So how do you develop good controls within the company? You need to create good control environment. And what control environment, I don't know what that is. So what control environment is basically is your mission statement and the vision statement. So your ethics, your policies within the company, what kind of risk the management is going to take. That's called as a risk appetite. So risk appetite is how much the management. When I say management, I say CEO, CFO, anybody that starts with a C in a company. Mainly the CEO is willing to take, how much risk the management is willing to take to get new products out. How much are they willing to sacrifice? How much money can they spend in developing new products? For example, Microsoft, if they want to come up with a new operating system, how much money are they willing to spend? It's called as a risk appetite. So how much money do you give them? Okay. So the control environment mainly is the management's philosophy, the operating style, the risk appetite, the ethics of the company, integrity of the company, responsibilities. How do you assign responsibilities? How do you hire people? How good are the board of directors? So your entire environment within the company, and that's what control environment is. Good enough? Okay. So the and again, this is more auditing than AIS, but this is something that you have to remember. These are all new terms that you don't know, but you should remember all of them. They are all part of this exam in the auditing part in 440, and then on the CPA, this is all there. Okay, so uh, Corso said we have to develop all these 5 things, and you have to use a software called as ERM, or the Enterprise Risk Management Model. It's a software, or it's program that tells you how to control risk. Remember, in business, everything is about risk. The biggest risk of a company is that it will go bankrupt. So your job is to minimize the risk of losing money and investments of somebody else's money, right? Because the company doesn't have its own money. It's the shareholders that are pumping in money, or they borrow money from the bank, such as loans that you studied in your financial accounting, long-term, short-term loans, and everything. So something called as the risk-based model or a control-based model. I'm not going to ask you a lot of information on this, but what we are looking at and what we do now in real world is what we look at as risk-based model. That means we go to every department and see where the maximum risk is, and we try and minimize that. For example, if you go to a manufacturing unit, the biggest risk is somebody is going to, or the machines are going to break, so you need to have good machines, or somebody is going to steal your raw materials. So you want to make sure that you assign more money there so that you can minimize that kind of risk. So you can have more cameras there, you can have more educated people working in there, or you can give them more training and all that stuff. So that's risk-based model, and that's what we use. So in the risk assessment part of it, every company has a risk. There's no company without risk. Even a company of GE can lose a lot of money, or even if a company like IBM, Microsoft, there are large companies that have gone into bankruptcies and lost money, and so there's always a risk. So there are 4 ways in which you can control that risk. Either you can accept it, that we are in a business and it's a high risk business. Apple, for example, is in a high risk business because Samsung is a big competition, and there are other companies that make the same kind of cell phones, um, and they come up with a better design. Then Apple starts losing money, and that's what it's happening with them. With the current system that they have, it's not up to mark with what Samsung and other companies are providing. So you have to accept it that you're in a business and you might lose money. You can diversify. Diversify is you can go into joint ventures with other smaller companies, and you can diversify the risk. So minimize your risk um, by having more joint ventures or partnerships. So you can divide those risks. The other way is to share it, and sharing is every company has something called as an insurance, a lawsuit insurance, and this is the same thing as a car insurance but for companies. So when every company gets sued at a given point in time. Every large company has anywhere between 100 to 200 lawsuits against them, and so they need to get some kind of insurance so that they don't have to pay 100% of the losses on lawsuit. So they can share it with the insurance company, and for which they keep making monthly premiums, and these premiums will go around million to $2 million a month. uh, but again, they are sharing that with some other company. And transfer it is basically saying we don't want to take this risk, so we'll outsource our products. So most companies you see they're outsourcing rather than developing the products in-house. For example, Chevy uses engines that are developed, or were until a few years ago, were using engines that were developed by Toyota. So they were not developing things inside, they were transferring the risk to Toyota, and the engines were coming from there. So all they were doing is get a proper assembly line and assemble the product and sell it. So that's transferring. Okay. And so again, you have to set objectives. Every company has an objective, and these objectives are at four different levels, or four different kinds of objectives that the company set. So when I start a company, I need to have all these four objectives met to be successful. If not, then there are going to be problems. Either you lose money or you'll have a lot of lawsuits against you. So you need to have a strategic objective. A strategy or a strategic objective is a strategy of how to make money. So overall level, what is my mission? So for example, bottom line, the mission for every company is to make money. But how to make money and how to improve customer service is one way in which your mission can differ. For example, when we look at Walmart and we look at Target, right? We know both companies are in the same industry selling products, but the way companies make money is very different. Walmart, for example, is not into a customer service business. Their policy, their mission statement is just to make money. So they don't care about customer service. And so they'll sell any product and don't worry about, and really they don't worry about what the customer experience is. Target, on the other hand, has a much refined store. You can find employees walking around and they can help you at any time. Again, both companies in the same industry, mission is to make money, but how to make that money differs. So that's your strategy. Operations is whenever you see operational or operations, even financial accounting or tax or any other course that you're taking, operations always means minimizing cost and maximizing profits. So that's what operation is. So every company should have a strategy or an objective of how to minimize cost and how to maximize your profits. The reporting objective is about how do you report your financial statements, and how well do you report them, and how many times do you report them, and who reports them, and how do you write a report and all that stuff. So those are all your reporting compliance or reporting objectives. And compliance is all the rules and regulations that you need to follow besides accounting rules, because reporting requires your accounting rules, but every company is part of other larger environment. So you have environmental laws, you have laws in a specific industry. Oil and gas industry is very different, so you have to follow different laws. All the laws in that industry. IT companies are different. Movie industry is different. So every company has a different compliance that they need to follow, and every company should be following that. If not, then you're getting fined, and that's not a good model. Okay. So again, so ERM also tells you how to identify event. On my true or false question, if I ask you what an event is, event normally would be a negative event. Identifying where things are going wrong is more important than identifying how things are working without giving a report out. So anytime something goes wrong, an event should be created, and then somebody who's in charge of that sector should immediately start working on the corrective part of it. For example, if your computer systems fail, and if you're making a journal entry and it's not posting in the financial statements, that's an event. It's a negative event, and a report should be created, and that should be fixed right away. And there are positive events also. You want to keep in mind that you need to have positive events too. So something that's working right, you don't want to change that. So you need to have a report for that. But mostly, whenever I say event, whenever ask a question about event, and in real life, then you go to work, an event will normally signify a negative event that's happening or negative thing that's happening. Okay, and you need to identify where it's starting and who's responsible and how to fix it. And again, a good company is the one that can anticipate any event. So there are two kinds of events that you should remember. One is an internal event and one is an external event. An internal event is whatever happens within the company, and you can control those events, such as hiring people if the CEO is going to retire, or if the CEO is getting fired, or if the company is not making good products. Those are internal events that you can control. Externals are your environmental problems, such as global warming is a problem, or you can have governmental problems, war, um, earthquakes. All these are external, and then you cannot control them. So some those are non-control or uncontrollables, and events that are inside within the company, you can control them. And every internal event should be anticipated. Market changes, market going up and down, all that should be anticipated by the company. Okay. Again, so risk, as I said, everything about business is risk. It's risk in doing anything. And this is a basic analogy of risk of driving a car. For example, driving a car for you is driving, and the risk involved are two. One is you can get a ticket, and the other one, you can have an accident. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, but the risk is always there. And that's what, even with the business, the risk is always there. No matter what you do, no matter how good your car is, or no matter how good you drive, there is always going to be some kind of a risk. And so that kind of a risk is called as an inherent risk. Inherent risk is something which is always there, okay, in the business. And for business purposes, inherent risk is loss or bankruptcy, okay. And residual risk is, you have risk, I understand that, but you can get the best car and you can be the best driver, but any risk remaining after that is called a residual. So anything remaining after that. So for a good company, example would be, if you develop a good anti-risk system or a good control system within the company. For example, let's say a retail store, again as Walmart, there are hundreds of thousands of products within the store. You have cameras everywhere, you can have employees everywhere, no matter what happens. So these are all proper controls that are putting in, but there's always a risk that somebody is going to walk out with a piece of gum or a pack of cigarettes or any small item. That's a residual risk. That means no matter what you do, you put every control within there, but there is always going to be risk that something bad is going to happen. So this is called a residual risk. Good. All right. So again, what we do is, we talked about this before. You can reduce your risk, accept it, share it, or avoid it. Whatever you can do, um, you can reduce your risk by creating good controls. You can accept that no matter what you do, you are going to be in a business which is risky. Right now, IT industry is the riskiest industry you can be, both for software and hardware, because every day there's something new coming up. You can share it, as I said, you can share it with an insurance company, or you can decide not to be in that industry and go into a completely different industry, and you can avoid it. So control activities are, these are the actual activities. After you set the policies and procedures and everything, you will identify where the risk is. These are the actual activities where you do want to implement all those policies that you set. So one of the biggest things that you have to remember in this one is called a segregation of duties. Segregation of duties is just a fancy word for separation of power. So you cannot give this one department or one person all the power. Let's look at an example of accounts receivables, for example. If I'm the only one that's responsible for accounts receivables and making entries for that, when I get cash, and I'm the one making counting that cash and making an entry and then depositing that cash into the bank, the problem is, well, if there's no segregation, I can take the money, put it in my pocket, and say bad debts, and just walk away, and nobody's going to check for that. So you need to have at least three members in there. In segregation, you need to have one person that has the authority to sign, one person that's going to record everything, and the third department that's going to have custody of all the cash. So your department is an accounting department, you are the recording department, you record everything. You'll never touch cash, and you'll never have custody of the cash. You don't do anything but record everything. As an accountant, you are not responsible for making payments or receiving payments. That's the job of the accounts receivable department and the accounts payable department, which is not an accounting department. You are doing all the accounting entries. Okay, so that's segregation duties. You need to separate power. You cannot have the same person doing all three or same department doing all three. Fraud can be very easy. Okay, so that's what I said, authorizing, recording, and custody. So that's segregation of power, separation of duty powers. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, moving along. All right, so biggest thing in the company is information and communication, is how you hold information and how can you communicate that information. You have to be very careful when you start working in accounting. There are certain information and communication that you cannot do with somebody from outside the company, especially any private information about the accounting policies and costing of the companies. Do not share it with anybody, not with your spouse, not with the brothers, not with the family, anybody, not even with your dog. Don't do it, okay? Because communication is very sensitive. If they find out, you not only lose a job, but you might be in prison for that. So every company has a policy of how to gather, record, and communicate that information. So anything can be communicated which is public. So all the financial statements, when they are made public or shared with the public by the company, then you can share it with anybody. But any private information which cannot be shared outside, do not share it. And these are the policies. Okay, so the information and communication is very strict. When you get hired, and if you're working for a public company or a large company, you'll go through a training about how this communication can be done. Sending personal emails, receiving personal emails, phone calls, texts while working, all this is policy that is, goes against you. So do not do it. And because you cannot do that is because there is a constant monitoring process that happens. One, they also monitor the employees, and the other one is they're monitoring how good the framework is working. So internal control is not only monitoring the AIS system, but they're also monitoring all the people that are working within the company. So, and they will do this constantly. This is done every month. You look at the report, and they communicate that report with the higher ups, and you don't want to be in that event, in a negative event. Okay. And so monitoring basically is they want to make sure that their IT system is working well, all the controls are put that have been in place by the management is working well. There is no fraud, there are no negative events, all the laws are complied with, and they have to do this all over again every month. Okay. Let's see, any questions? Perfect. Okay. Let's see. Do I stop? Okay. Stop sharing. Okay. So what we have this Friday is you have an exam. As I said, you have again, what chapters did I say? 3, 5, 6, and 7. What you need to remember is what most of the questions are from the slides. Yes, project. Give me 1 second. So anything that we studied from the slides are on the exam. So please read the slides carefully. I'm not going to test you anything that is outside of the course material. So some of those stuff would be from the textbook. So read the questions carefully. On the previous chapter, on chapter 6, where we had all the hacking and all that stuff. Let me see if I can have the slides for that. Let's see. Chapter 7. Okay. So I'm going to share the screen again with you. Okay, so guys, from this chapter, I want you to know what hacking, social engineering, and malware is. Again, this is just basic understanding what each of them mean. Hacking normally comes from the outside, and it's an unauthorized access. Social engineering, on the other hand, is a technique or a trick that people physically use to make friends and all that stuff. And malware is a software that is within the company. It sits on the computer for a long time, and then it starts to destroy your information. So know the difference between the three. um, in hacking, what I want you to know is what are zombies, and we talked about that. So zombies are just dead computers that are used by hackers. um, they can hack into your computer, they can kill your computer, and they can use your computer to hack into somebody else's computer, and that's called as zombies. Okay, I need you to know what spoofing is and what spamming is, and all that information, and denial of service. So again, denial of service is a system where you are denied any access to a website. And for example, if I want to buy something from Amazon, if the hackers have hacked into Amazon, I cannot get through Amazon, and Amazon can lose a lot of money. Spamming, everybody knows what spamming is. It's just receiving unauthorized emails that might look it's coming from a reliable source, but sometimes it has virus in it. So spamming is that. And spoofing is very similar to what spamming is, but spoofing is it's it looks like it's coming from a friend, and what they're trying to do is create a same email like that looks like your friend, or a site that's owned by a reliable source, and they're trying to gain information, confidential information from you. So no zombies, denial of service, spamming, spoofing. And the spoofing is again divided into email spoofing, and which is what you normally get. You get an email from a bank telling you to put personal information in there. That's email spoofing. Basically, what they're trying to look like a Bank of America email or Chase email, but it's coming from a hacker. I don't know if I have buffer overflow, but know what buffer overflow is. It's just sending a large amount of information on your computer, so that your computer dies and hangs. Man in the middle, I've talked about that. It's when you try, again, if you go to Amazon, before you go to Amazon, it's going to go to their website, the hacker's website. It's called as a man in the middle, and then go to Amazon, so they can see everything that you're typing and everything that you're buying. It's crazy. Salami technique is one of the questions I have, and it's just taking piece of information at a time, not all the information. So it's a software that takes one information or one penny from $100,000 transaction at a time, and it's very hard to find out until it's too late. So salami technique is very, very difficult, and it's very, very potent. So again, know what that is. Economic espionage is just stealing somebody else's information. So it's one corporate taking information from other corporates, such as Apple stealing information from Samsung and vice versa. Cyber extortion is threatening people over emails or through social media. And again, hacking is always for fraud. And social engineering is all this. And in this one, identity theft is one that you need to know. You need to know what scavenging is. It's also called as dumpster diving. you're physically looking at their shredded paperwork. Phishing is same thing, just sending out emails so that you can with links. So all they do is they have a subject, and then you open up, and there's a link that you think you should open, but it's nothing else but uh, uh, some kind of hacking device. And so why people fall into all this? These are some. So again, identity theft, scavenging, and phishing. Know what spyware is? So it's a secret software that sits in your system for a very long time and spies and takes bytes of information or bits of information from you and sends it out. Uh, you also need to know what keylogger software is. It's a software that can record every keystrokes that you type. So anytime you type something, it's gonna log all that, and it's sending somebody else your information. Sorry. But since you log into your bank online, so using your computer, they can see what you're typing. So that's that. Virus is another one. So difference between a spyware and a virus is the spyware sits there and takes information out. So spyware only take information out, but virus is something that duplicates itself over and over again, and to slow down your computer, and it will start with taking more, small information, and will start taking more and more information at the time as the time goes by. So that's from that chapter. Okay, so we have already done chapter 5. Please go through the lecture on chapter 5 that I've recorded and posted on Blackboard. And I'm recording this one, and I'm gonna post a link for this one also online. And I'll open the exam this Friday. Okay, Omar, what's your question about the project? Let's finish the exam, and then we'll talk about next Monday. We'll talk about the details on the project. I can explain that then. And I think it shouldn't take more than 3 or 4 hours over a weekend to finish it. Students have done it easily over a weekend, so it's not very difficult to do. And all the information about is in the textbook. I'll tell you exactly what chapters to look at, and then you can just replicate what's in there. Okay. Any question, guys? All right. So thank you everyone for showing up. I'm going to record this thing. And then I'll post this link. Hopefully, I'm not going to do the same thing I did last time by closing it, and I lost the link last time. So, all right. Thank you, guys. Have a good night. And I'm going to remember, there's an exam this Friday. So please finish the exam, and I'll see you guys next Monday. Thank you.